In Gaza, today marked the start of Eid, another day of Israeli strikes, the latest on a tented encampment in Khan Yunis. The injured brought to Al Nasser hospital, where staff said 16 were killed, among them 9 children and 3 women. In the morgue, 2 sisters dressed for the festival lay next to each other, joined by their younger brother and then their mother.
We were waiting for them to come visit this Eid, but they died in their Eid clothes. Why did they do this to us?
As the dead were buried, across the city, Eid prayers, a day typically marked with vibrant colour and children's gifts, suffused instead with grief and fear.
There is no joy. I have many martyrs. My grandson is a martyr. There is no joy and there is no taste to anything. As you can see, even when we pray, we feel afraid and there are aircraft overhead.
The Israeli military released images of what it said were strikes on terrorist infrastructure as it announced an expanded ground operation in the far south. The Prime Minister vowing to crush Hamas further in order to free Israeli hostages, 24 of whom are believed still to be alive. He says Israel is engaging in ceasefire talks, but the final destination is non-negotiable.
Hamas will disarm. Its leaders will be allowed to leave. We will ensure general security in the Gaza Strip and allow the implementation of the Trump plan, the voluntary emigration plan.
Tel Aviv last night, protesters instead demanding a deal that ends the war and brings the hostages home. A poll on Friday suggested 69% of Israelis agree. Hamas says it's accepted a new Egyptian-Qatari proposal for a ceasefire that would see 5 Israeli hostages released per week, but it rejects Israel's longer-term demands.
There will be no displacement or deportation. As for the weapons of the resistance, they are a red line and are linked to the existence of the occupation and the establishment of the independent Palestinian state.
But Hamas has been facing protests of its own. On 3 consecutive days last week, hundreds chanted Hamas out, calling for an end to the war. For now, those protests have receded amid reports of violence and intimidation. One of those who took part, Uday al-Rabai. On Saturday, his body was dragged to his parents' door. They tortured him to death with all kinds of hard tools, says this man. An iron fist must be brought down upon these criminal oppressors. That in itself, another rare challenge to Hamas's authority. His family says the killers were affiliated to the group's military wing and they're demanding retribution.
Well, I've been speaking to Antoine Renard, Palestine director for the World Food Programme, who joined me from Deir al-Bawa in central Gaza. I asked him what the situation was like after Israel began bombing the enclave again.
What you face is real food scarcity. And what we are afraid is that a number of goods managed to come during the ceasefire, but very quickly these stocks are being depleted. This is the longest period of closure since the start of this war, practically 17 months ago. So the challenge that we look forward, we have perhaps 1 to 2 days to continue to support 19 bakeries. We have provided our last food parcels to population. It will last for a week. So that's really the fear currently in Gaza.
But there is a real prospect that this blockade of aid on Gaza goes on indefinitely. There's no end in sight.
And that's exactly why we need to continue to plead. So we do end this closure, that aid needs to enter into Gaza. That's why it's so important that for your viewers, for us in terms of United Nations and from the World Food Programme, we are raising the fact that we are running short of food, that the situation could again be dire, and then we face again key challenges related to hunger into the Gaza Strip.
Whose mind are you going to change? Because President Trump has given Israel his full support. There's no sign at all that he's going to change his mind. What happens then?
This is exactly why we need to continue to have the plea. There are mediators that are an ongoing negotiation are still happening in Doha. This is why we need to continue to focus on the needs of the population, be the voice of the civilians that are on the ground, remind also the protection of the humanitarian so we are able to do our job. And that's why we continue to do this plea for the population that are living here.
We've heard these pleas and their urgency. Is there any sign at all that Donald Trump hears them?
From our end, this is why we continue to advocate to all the different actors, the one that you did mention, but also the mediators. The population that are in Gaza do require, from a regional perspective, from the international community, that their voice is being heard. And that's why we're talking today.
And meanwhile, what's happening to all the aid and the food that would otherwise be going into Gaza?
So what we currently have is that we have food that is in Egypt, in Ashdod, as well as in Amman. We have all it takes to actually feed population for the next 3 months from the food security actors. Everything is ready. The beauty of the ceasefire, it has proven that the moment we were having a proper opening, we could deliver full speed. In the month of February, we practically provided a full ration to population. 75% of the population were having proper food access. In December, only 4%. So we can show that we can have an impact when we are allowed to do our job.